So now you have come up with some answers to Do For's 4 questions, considering the outcome or the topic that the specialisation teacher has given you. And you're going to use this information to evaluate a unit plan where the specialisation teacher has removed aspects of their choice to create a flawed VCE unit. So they will give you this unit and they might have taken out activities or assessment or goals. They might have changed the structure of the lesson, learning intentions, or a combination of the above. So you need to consider this unit for teaching. Let's say in the next semester, you need to consider what is working in the unit, so what needs to stay, and any changes that need to be made to improve the unit plan and therefore potentially improve student outcomes. You need to consider evidence of good practice. So you will discuss with your group where you see good practice and annotate that on the unit plan to show that you understand where good practice is evident. So you'll give a brief explanation and justification of why you consider that good evidence. So you could use pedagogical literature, you could use the HITs, the E5, etc., to help substantiate your statement. You also need to make changes to the unit and annotate why these changes have been made. So you might see that, there's no warm-up to the lesson, and you can put one in and say, well, this warm-up has been chosen for these reasons. And you also need to think about the instructional strategies such as engagement, differentiation, and inclusion. How has the unit plan considered these 3 instructional strategies, or has it not considered it? And how would you improve it, to improve the engagement of the VCE or VCAL learner, for an example? You need to also discuss, where is the evidence of the examiner's reports? So in the past, what has the examiner said that it was a real deficit in student answers, and has this unit addressed that deficit in order to support the students towards the exam? Same for the advice for teachers. What does the advice for teachers say? And is that evident in the unit plan? If there's not, well, you could also put in, well, what would you do to address this? So if we take a look at an example from psychology, and we say, okay, we're looking at area of study 1 in unit 3. This would be an example of what the teacher could give you, okay? And you will not necessarily do this on the computer, you might do this by hand, but this example's on the computer, and that's fine. You could write little comments. So I've got little comments on the side. You can't quite see that, but I've said, okay, well, all of the key knowledge from area of study 1, unit 3 have been covered and feature in the lessons. If I go down, here we go, this one we can see. So we've got, the meta language listed here is really important, but there's a bit of a deficit here. We could include keywords from the science skills. So the science skills are the key skills that feature in all of the sciences in VCE. Some of the keywords from there could be featured, as well as the Bloom's taxonomy verbs that occur in exams, such as analyse and explain, because that's something that they need to, students need to understand the meaning of those terms and how to answer these types of questions. So I've written that there, okay? And you'll see that, I've mentioned HITs here, and I've highlighted some scaffolded learning, okay? And you can see all of these in the exemplar. Now, you should consider, reflect and annotate your appraisal of the unit plan as a whole. So you don't have to, pick every single lesson and mention, engagement, for an example. in every single lesson. Okay, so as long as you are demonstrating your knowledge in that particular area somewhere on the unit plan, you'll still get a really good mark. Okay, so you need to have a discussion on the features in the unit as a whole, but not necessarily in every single lesson. So it's up to you and your group to make a professional judgment as to the most important aspects you should be addressing in your specialization in accordance to the assessment instructions. Okay. So once you've done that, the next step is then to show how the content is progressing in the unit. So considering, the learning of the student and how that builds upon their knowledge is really important in VCE. So you could do this a number of ways, and you can do it any way that you wish, but you need to explain how the content is progressing and developing. So you'll do this by highlighting the content, what the students are experiencing, the complexity of activities, and then take note of how the assessment is linked. So you could do a design board similar to the one that was in the assessment instructions. So here we've got the sequence of learning, and then we've got the activities shown where they link, and then the assessment is linked. Okay. Or you could do a concept map, which is the one in the exemplar. Okay, so here we've got the difficulty of the complexity of the content, and then we've got the content, in its different topics. And then you've got the red, I know you can't read this, it's clearer in the exemplar. You've got the red assessments shown there. So this will take some time. You'll have 1 hour and 50 minutes to do this task before we go on to the reflection. So be as thorough as time permits. Again, remember, you are not just assessed through your written work, but also your group discussion. So talk to each other, constructively challenge each other's ideas in a respectful manner. So pause the video now and begin the task. Okay, so finally, the reflection. You need to pick one student to consider how the unit supports that student. So we have considered some students, some potential, typical students that you might get in your classroom in this unit. You could pick one of them, and they are located in the VU Collaborate. Or you could come up with a student on your own and just write a brief profile so that we know what, without identifying any names or schools or anything. And you need to consider, well, how has this unit, with its modifications, how is that supporting the student that you're discussing? Okay, so write full sentences here, and you will write responses to these four, no more than 500 words. What curriculum, content, learning experiences, and teaching approaches have you included that will allow this student to achieve their learning goals? So here you're giving evidence from within the unit design to validate how you are supporting your student. You must discuss the pedagogical approaches that are specific to your specialization here. You need to substantiate your discussion with at least one reference from literature. Okay, so that's not including government policy and, the pedagogical model, for example. You should also substantiate your discussion by mentioning the pedagogical model. So, you could pick HITS, E5, the practice principles. You can choose. So we've got at least one literature reference and some from the pedagogical model as well. Second question, how will you provide targeted support or extension for this student? So here you're demonstrating your understanding of differentiation. You are definitely making some inferences to the level and learning of your hypothetical student and where they need to be, and this is okay for this task. You need to discuss the differentiation approaches and scaffolding here for that student. So consideration of providing extension where applicable, if that's what this student needs. Where are the opportunities for higher order thinking? Where are the opportunities for convergent and divergent thinking? Where will you use data to inform your instruction? Or how will you support your student towards the SAC task and the exam? There is so much to write here. So you need to make a judgment, again, as to the most important aspects you should be addressing in accordance to the assessment as instructions. Third question, what have I learnt through this planning experience, and how will this inform your instruction and planning in the future? So here you obviously discuss what you've learnt through this experience, this planning experience, and you need to be as specific as possible as to how the learned skill applies to either instruction or to planning. What does it actually look like? Last question, what is the progress made with the AT2 standards? How have you achieved the AT2 standards in this planning process? So you need to pick one AT2 standard. One's sufficient here. You need to provide a specific example or examples of how you have either progressed or achieved the standard. So don't just write the AT2 standard again, don't just rewrite it in your own words. You need to actually demonstrate your knowledge of the standard and its application. Okay, so we're looking for a justification and evidence here in this answer. So you'll have about 40 minutes to write these 500 words. And once you've finished, each group member needs to submit all the documents into their own Dropbox so that we can evaluate your assignment.